you guys, this story, I got a two-part to the story because the story is going to be on generational home unaffordability. And we're going to take a look at like what Gen Zers are looking for in a president, and then what are boomers. You guys, it's all over the place. And then I'm going to give hope to the Gen Zers. If you're a Gen Zer, you're watching this, you're like, oh my God, you know, America robbed me. They stole the American dream of home ownership. I got some hope for you. And that's how I'm going to end this video. I'm going to show you what's going to happen the next 5 years based on historical trends. And I'm really looking forward to that. So I hope you guys like it. Let me get started here by, actually, I have to share my screen. Just bear with me 1 second, you guys. Here we go right here. And I'm going to switch cameras. So we're going to start by taking a look at this article, and then I'm going to go into some, again, like I said, some affordability stuff. And then I can't wait to break down the income versus home price growth that I've been researching. But the name of this article is Housing Affordability is Gen Z's Top Voting Issue. Reason is, I'm going to tell you guys right now, is because Gen Z, they took the hit the most. I mean, imagine being a young adult right now. I mean, you cannot buy a house. It's almost impossible to buy a house right now if you're a young adult. Think about that. Think about what anxiety and depression and loss of hope, loss of identity these young adults have. I mean, it's a real thing going on. But again, you guys, there is hope. I will show you that. But a couple things I want to point out here. Now, this article is saying millennials, Gen Xers, and baby boomers all ranked the overall economy as the top issue, but not, again, what I'm saying is it's not Gen Zers. This goes on. More than 9 in 10, so 91% of adult Gen Zers say housing affordability is important when considering who they will vote for in the upcoming presidential election, making it the top issue for that generation. Okay, so Gen Zers were more likely to rate housing affordability, again, as the most important factor. But what I want to show you guys is what happens when, you know, with the age groups. This is actually pretty incredible. So this has 4 different columns, obviously different rows, and the rows are ranking what's more important. But each column represents an age group. The first age group is Gen Z, second is millennials, third is Gen Xers, and the fourth is those crappy baby boomers. I'm just kidding, baby boomers. I'm just jealous. You got a ton of opportunity that I wish I had. A little jealous, but I'm just joking, okay? So look at this, guys. Again, the young adults, the priority, let me zoom into this real quick, okay? The priority, zoom in a little bit more here. Jackie requested that, right? Like zoom in. So the priority of Gen Zers for presidential election, this is on the young people's minds, housing affordability #1. Now, millennials, Gen Xers, and baby boomers all have the same priority, the strength of the overall economy. Now, strength of overall economy is next in line for Gen Zers. But take a look at this, you guys. What I want to say is as you get older, housing affordability is less important to you because you've already made your money. Again, it's the younger kids that are really, really suffering. And you see that when we go over to millennials, housing affordability drops to #3. When you go to Gen Xers, housing affordability drops even more to #4. When you go to the baby boomers, they're like, housing affordability, why do we care? We own 4 houses free and clear, right? So their housing affordability is all the way to #6. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know if you guys think that's interesting or not, but also what's interesting is preserving democracy. The younger you are, the less preserving democracy matters to you. Probably because they don't trust democracy. Think about it, guys. How could Gen Zers trust democracy in the world that we're living in right now? I mean, not to mention just the inflation, but the data, the data revisions. I don't trust the democracy a lot of times. So again, the younger you get, the less that's important to you. Very interesting for both Gen Xers and baby boomers, preserving democracy was the second overall pick. But when we get into the younger millennials and Gen Zers, look at this. It goes so far down. For millennials, that's the 5th concern. And actually for Gen Zs, here we go right here, 6th concern. In other words, what I'm trying to explain to the viewers is everyone, for the most part, is concerned about the housing market. And generally, the younger you are, the least amount of hope you have. But again, I'm going to end in hope. I'm going to end this video in hope, but I want to go in and touch in why the housing market is so unaffordable. So many people get this wrong. They're like, it's because of interest rates. Well, it's not just because of interest rates. Okay, remember how payments are calculated. It's both interest rate and price, and it's the price that is dooming us. The interest rate they can play with. They can go up, they can go down, but it is the price that's killing us, guys. And take a look here. This is from Black Knight. Now, what you guys are looking at here, I'll be very quick, and then we're going to go into the really good stuff. This is a national payment to income ratio. This is not counting taxes and insurance. So these numbers are much worse because we have a situation right now in the housing market where we have never experienced such skyrocketing homeowners insurance and skyrocketing property taxes. Hopefully you're not in a metro area like I am, where I'm getting hit by both. So that's not in these numbers. And this counts a 20% down payment. All right. Most down payments are not 20%, but that's what this is counting. This is saying the level of unaffordability is basically the highest it's been since about the 1980s. And I'm going to show you what citizens were going through in the 1980s, and we'll make that comparison. But again, you guys, if you're going to buy a house right now, you're going to be married to your mortgage payment. And as someone that used to be married to a mortgage payment, I got to tell you, that relationship goes downhill real fast. Real fast, that goes downhill. Okay, you don't want to be married to no mortgage payment. You want to be married to someone that you love, you're friends with, you help each other grow, blah, 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 blah. But that's the prices, okay? That's the interest rate. That's what's happening as far as interest rates. Look at prices. Again, I show this all the time. The PE ratio went up even higher to 7.68. So we have 7.68 years it takes to pay for a house. The peak of the bubble, according to this data, was under 7. All right, going back to the 1970s, again, you want to compare 70s and 80s, just look at the price to income, okay? The PE ratio. Nowhere near what's going on right now. Nowhere even close. You cannot compare the 70s and 80s to what's going on right now. It does not work. And so here's the hope, you guys. Let me switch here, okay? Here's what I've been saying. Okay, there's all of these, debates and, disagreements. This matters, that matters, inventory, supply, demand, blah, 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 blah. But I will say the primary factor that bulls cannot explain, okay? Every single one I've talked to cannot explain income. They can't explain how people are going to play this or going to pay for this. They cannot acknowledge sustainability. They can't acknowledge how important income growth is. But when we go back into the space-time continuum of the history of the United States, we see actually income is vital. Let me show you guys, all right? So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to do a different format here, like this, all right? But I'm going to put this. Hi, Jack, how are you? Okay. And you know what? I'm going to do something special. Here's what I'm going to do so you can still see me. Look at that. Oh, my gosh. Look at what I'm doing. Oh, my God. Oh, how did I do that? Pretty cool, right? That's what $10,000 gets you right there. You can move your picture around. You guys want to buy this from me? I'll sell it to you for deflationary. Okay, whatever. Anyways, guys, take a look at this. This is absolutely insane. And then I'm going to break this down into half decade. What you're looking at right here is home price growth. Okay, let me see if I can circle that. Home price growth compared to income growth based on a 10-year history. So you're looking at a decade. Essentially, what you're looking at is the 1980s, 1990s, 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s. So again, guys, you're looking at the decade picture. So let's compare the 1980s, all right? The 1980s, massive home price growth. You guys are right. Massive home price growth, all right? Look at that. It had 65% home price appreciation during the 1980s. But you guys see that big black line right there? You see that? You guys know what that is? That's income. What I'm trying to explain to the viewers, to any bulls that are watching this, is the income growth during the 1980s outpaced home price growth. It outpaced, you guys, this is important. It outpaced home price growth. We had income growth of over 70% during the 1980s. Fast forward to the 1990s, look at, same thing in the 1990s. In the 1990s, you guys, we had a more income growth than we did home price growth in the 1990s. And the reason that is because income growth is super important. In fact, the only time where that switched was right here. Guess what happened in the 2000s, guys? The great financial crisis happened. And wait till I break this down into 5-year increments. You guys are going to be blown away. But look at this. basically what happened is the first part of the decade of the 2000s, home appreciation skyrocketed. The second half of the early 2000s, home prices went down, and so you have this closer equilibrium. Without the second half of the 2000s, that chart would not look like that, is the point I'm trying to make. But let's get real juicy here, okay? We're just gonna look at half of 2020. Look at this, okay? You see that? You see the massive differential between home prices, guys, and equity? You guys, we are so... How are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? You don't have the money, and that's not even adjusted for inflation. Look at how backwards that is. Breathe this in. Breathe this in. This is, in my opinion, the biggest factor is the income. If we had income growth match home price growth and we all made 50% more money, then all right. No housing market crash. Okay, we're not going to crash. All right? But that's not what happened. And I'm going to show you guys, let me break this down real quick to the 5-year increments. And you guys, I think, are going to be blown away, because here's the hope. Here's the hope. If you're a young person, if you're a Gen Z, or you're like, I'm never going to buy a house, here's the hope. I'm going to show you what happened. Okay, look at this. This is 5-year increments now. Look at this. This is right before, on 1 minute, guys, this is right before the great financial crisis. Look at this 5-year, this 5-year period, okay? During this 5-year period, home values went up like crazy, okay? Income barely went up at all, okay, during that 5-year period. Let's fast forward to 2020 through 2024. What do you guys see? And I want to remind you that this is really the only time in history, by the way, at least going back to the 1975s. We had almost the exact same thing happen in 2020 for 2024. And again, what I'm trying to ask is what does this look like when we adjust for inflation? How much worse is 2020 to 2024 when we adjust for inflation? Now, here's the thing. Here's the hope, Gen Zers. Look at what happened in 2005 to 2009, okay? These people right here paid for the price appreciation. They paid the last 5 years of the decade, okay? So the first part of the decade, everything was out of whack. Home prices went up too much, income didn't sustain, people stopped making payments, housing market crashed until income caught up, and then we have 2010 to 2014, a lot more normal, 2015 to 2019, a lot more normal, and then boom, look at what just happened now. So what I'm trying to explain to the viewers is don't worry, guys, the next 5 years, 2025 to 2029, if history repeats itself again, this is what it's going to look like. House prices are going to go down as wages continue to catch up. We have to have wages catch up to the values of houses. That's how things are sustained. We know that because we can reference the 1980s. We can look at the 1980s and say, yes, massive home price appreciation, 60%, 65%. But we would be naive. We would be naive if we don't acknowledge that income growth exceeded that. Whereas today, it is very far from that. In fact, right now we have quantitative tightening going on. The Fed doesn't want some wage price spiral. In other words, the government is making sure we don't make more money. And so that is the story I have for you.
So Travis, that was an excellent piece, excellent visual as well, because I think we've seen a lot of people on X Twitter try to talk about the 80s in terms of a home price acceleration period. But I think that harkens back to what I was saying about that income was rising because you had women start to participate in the labor force. And so I know you've had some bulls on your channel. I try to go on bull channels to talk because I want to listen. I want to hear what they have to say. But have they ever been able to answer to you what they think is going to happen to increase wages, and then also how we're going to, deal with the AI headwind to ensure that those wages increase?
So when I've talked to these people, what I get as a response, Melody, is, that doesn't matter. Yeah. The response to me is wage growth doesn't matter. But I'm like, well, that's the sustainability part of the equation, right? that's how you sustain prices. People have to continue to afford it, and so no, I've heard absolutely nothing logical from them on how this is going to maintain. What do you think, Jack?
Travis, housing affordability is not a one-dimensional issue. It ties in money supply, interest rates, tax policy, the job market, right? Housing affordability, we're going to pass a housing affordability law. That doesn't work that way, all right? There's so many variables in that equation. But I just want to tie in that last segment we just did. Now, while you were talking, I did a quick search. According to census data, the U.S. added 1.41 million housing units in all of 2023. That's single-family homes, multifamily condos, apartments, 1.41 million units added. And I just got done talking about, from the household survey, the foreign-born population in the United States grew by 1.5 million, 1.542 to be exact. So from a standpoint of supply and demand, housing demand rose faster than supply. Price is going higher. And remember, that's those same people that are coming into the country, adding to housing demand, are also adding labor supply. So from a job standpoint, from a wage standpoint, the supply of jobs is going up faster than the demand for jobs. And so wages are going down relative to the cost of living. So if we're talking about housing affordability for Gen Zers, which is their biggest issue, according to the data you showed, which was excellent, by the way, that's some potent politics right there. If we're serious about housing affordability for young Americans, then we need to have a serious conversation about immigration policy. We need to stop screaming past each other, and we need to have a policy that balances compassion for immigrants with compassion for younger Americans who are really suffering in this housing market. And one of the many causes of this housing unaffordability issue is that we keep importing demand for housing that is also flooding the market with supply of labor, which hurts housing affordability at both ends. It drives home prices higher and wages lower.
We're kind of being pushed in a corner to talk about this whole immigration thing. I absolutely hate talking about immigration now. I will say that I don't believe right now the impacts of immigration are affecting home values significantly, maybe a bit, but not significantly. And the reason I think that, Jack, is there's no way for them to get financing from traditional lenders.
Right, but they are renting places, right? There's entire hotels being rented out in cities, and they're renting apartments. It's that
right.
It
has an effect.
The housing chain.
It has an effect, but what I'm trying to do is differentiate the eligibility to get financing, citizen versus non-citizen. There are barriers, is my point. But nevertheless, if they're renting houses because they have to, and then getting jobs, that's going to affect the citizens. I understand that, but my point is thank God there's no financing loopholes. Not yet. And so, could it get even worse? It could potentially get even worse. But I think the more important issue is for the Gen Zers, Jack. I think that they need to stop looking at all this crap, and they need to start looking at themselves. They need to really buckle down. And if you think about it, what we just went over, it's right now, even though there is the hope, that second turn of the century hope, right now, it's extremely difficult the younger you are, and therefore it is more important to have old-fashioned fundamentals. You got to save your money. You got to be careful how you spend. You got to constantly rebudget. I rebudgeted last night. I don't even want to tell you how much money I saved. It was shocking. The problem is if people are doing their own thing, Jack. They don't have the same priorities, for example, as I did or my grandparents did. Their priorities is get married, have children, get a house, pay all my bills on time, don't go bankrupt, right? Right now, what are people's priority? To get the next best shoes, to be number one on the next video game? What motivates young people these days? I don't even know.
Trav, could you throw that chart up with the 5-year increments again? Because I just want to address the trend of doom spending. All right. If you're one of the people who has given up because of this current 5-year chart that shows home prices exploding faster than wages, go back and look at 2000 to 2004. All right. If people had doom spent in 2004 because homes were becoming so unaffordable, and a lot of people did, those people had no nest egg, had no cash available to take advantage in the following 5 years. when wages rose faster than home prices. They were left out and they never recovered from that. So, you know, you young guys right now who are giving up, and I understand the rationale. I don't understand the result because I just quitting ain't in my blood. But, you know, I understand why you're doing it and why it feels hopeless. Math doesn't change just because of certain policies. Sooner or later, that same thing is going to happen, like 2004 to 05, how home prices swapped and started going up slower than wages. You know, if you give up now, you will not be able to take advantage when that transition happens. So, you know, while your peers are giving up, if you don't, you will be light years ahead of them when this transition eventually happens.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I want to address quickly, just so you know, right now we know a lot of the immigrants are living in hotels, temporary housing. You know, a lot of which I think those hotels, the reason that they are housing immigrants is because they don't have occupancy. Otherwise, it's more, you know, financially beneficial for them to do this. And so I think a lot of those will transition to housing. And one thing I just want to say about just doing a simple comparison to, you know, units added. Number one, Travis and I both feel very strongly those numbers are not accurate. We've seen more units added. Secondly, we want to think about on average in the United States, a household is 2.6 folks. And, you know, so just think of it that way as well. You want to, you know, divide that by 3. So again, the math matters. And it also matters, like, what are they calling a housing unit? And can that change in the future as well? I just want everyone to understand that I still believe we're in an oversupply situation, even with all of these immigrants here already.
Mm-hmm. I would definitely agree, especially with new homes and from what we've seen personally, boots on the ground. I have a comment here from KOV, a longtime listener on my other channel. Appreciate your engagement. What his concern is a housing correction may not happen because losses would be impossible to handle because debt is too large. I mean, that's why there's bankruptcy and credit tightening and bank failure, right? I mean, it's not too.
It's a little like saying I can't get cancer because it would kill me. Just because the consequences are severe doesn't mean it can't happen, right?
But I mean, nevertheless, it's a genuine question and concern he has. Melody, can you kind of hit on this a little bit here? Is the debt too big to fail?
No, I mean, you know, again, we're talking about dynamics here, and our demographics are declining. Our incomes are not rising fast enough. Prices have accelerated. This is just about the inability. This is a demand issue where, you know, people don't have the money to demand or acquire that housing. And so, you know, this doesn't have as much, yes, the debt spending, you know, all of this, and the government's going to try to intervene, but these fundamentals don't change. Like this is the story. And as Jack said, and as we all three say, math matters. Like, and these trends will reverse these fundamentals, no matter how much. And I think it was Lacey Hunt that, you know, he's a great economist that talked about the productivity of debt. And how, you know, you take an actual productive dollar and you compare that to a dollar spent, you know, in debt, and how unproductive those debt dollars are, and how that is over time, you know, the ability to continue to generate GDP actually lessens. And so, you know, I honestly believe the more debt we take on, the less we're contributing to the economy, and it actually will accelerate some of these trends.
Okay, very good. I got some more stuff here from Jungle Book. Jungle Book also big member of Discord community. What he's saying is, I think it would also be naive to look at only wage increases. Jungle, we also looked at home increases. So we looked at both wage increases and home increases to compare it. So you're missing part of that in 2008 and 2011. And again, it was only a decade. So it was, you know, it wasn't a 2011, those categories. But anyways, people took pay cuts, but we also had massive price decline. I think wage and price decline could also occur. But let me follow it up by this right here. He has another question. I think this better summarizes what he's asking. Good guy, Jungle Book. Again, I love you, man. I hope that dog is trained. One thing that drives me crazy is people that don't train their dogs, especially German Shepherds. I love those dogs. I think it's a German Shepherd. Is it possible we see the opposite of wages catching up and we see a massive wage and market crash where they both equalize? What do you think, Jack? Is it possible?
I do. I'm just going to go from my own lived experience in 2008, 2009. My base salary didn't change. Actually, my base salary went up a token amount in 2008 to 2009, right? That cost of living adjustment. But the stock in the company I worked with at the time had crashed almost 40%. And so my AIP, my bonus at the end of that year, got cut in half. And well, my bonus was a significant portion of my take home pay. So my wages did decline. Plus, most of the stock holdings I had at the time dropped in value. So I didn't have the capital gains that I had the year behind. So my total household income from 08 to 09 dropped substantially. Now it very quickly reversed from 9, 10, 11 from there on out. But absolutely, when you get a deflationary market crash, like we're talking about, if housing crashes and takes the stock market with it, you're going to have higher unemployment and you're going to have lower take-home pay. Abso-freaking-lutely. The question is the relative change. Is housing is going to drop faster than wages are going to drop. I think that's almost guaranteed. And then there's also the fact that what does the central banker do? What does the Treasury Department do? Do they try to fight it with stimmies and make inflation worse? That's really hard to try to anticipate, especially when they're throwing around trillions of dollars. But I can absolutely envision a scenario like Jungle Book is saying here, but it's the relative move when it comes to home affordability, the subject of this segment. I think it's the relative move of wages and housing that's important there.
And I got one more for you, Melody. We only have about 30 seconds. I just want to give a shout out to Orlando. What's up, man? And also, KV, I didn't take it. Hey, no, I hope no one took it as a nasty comment. This is a buddy.
Yeah.
All right, we're part of community. KV, of course not, man. I mean, these types of questions sharpen us also. Keep asking questions, but I appreciate you, man. You're a sweet guy. But no, we didn't take it that way. And I hope no one else did. But I got something for you, Melody. Which one do I want to do? Question. Here we go. Let's do this. Okay, this one's crazy. Here we go. I don't know. I mean, this is a little bit crazy, Melody. I think this is right up your alley. I don't know. Jack, even though I'm just don't look at that. Melody, the U.S. needs the undocumented immigrants to do the cheap labor that U.S. citizens won't take. That's the same in every other country around the world. I'm just bringing this up real quick, even though it's not part of the segment, because I know you would probably be able to answer that question pretty accurately.
Well, I feel like Jack really did a good job talking about this in the last segment that, yes, the elite want this cheap labor to come in, but it is not helping you and me or the forgotten American. They want to pay their maids, under fair market value. We've seen articles like in Miami where the housekeepers are charging $150,000 a year and people are competing for housekeeping services because, there's just not the cheap labor around. And what the elites need is the cheap labor. And so I don't believe it's that we need to import it to do the jobs we don't want. As Jack said, because I'm just like Jack, I've been working. I started actually getting a real paycheck when I was 12 years old, washing dishes. And so I've done a ton of really menial labor in my life, and I did it for the right price. I'm not going to do it if I can't sustain an existence with it. That's a different story altogether. And so I think we've all been a little fooled. And sorry, you said 30 seconds, Travis, but I'm going longer. If you guys remember that that documentary funded by the Obamas called American Factory, which was trying to teach us that Americans are super lazy and the Chinese are super industrious. And it did a lot of juxtaposing of, the Chinese workers, the 5 or 6 to a 2-bedroom apartment, cooking food in the home. And the US worker was living in somebody's basement of like a sister eating McDonald's anyway, watch the documentary. There's a lot of propaganda in that. And I believe that, there's been a narrative for some time that Americans are lazy, stupid, and they don't want to work. I think you give them a pathway to productivity, they're going to come out, and a pathway to reach middle class, to reach what the boomers got, to get their white picket fence and their 2 cars and their 2.5 kids. If you give people a pathway to that, they'll come back. But right now, we're all working for those of us that don't hold assets, those of us who aren't these lucky few, we're all working crazy amounts just to be able to sustain a very, very unfulfilling existence.
Very good. Jack, you want to add anything?
Yes. Michael, I would highly recommend you go visit a website called WTF Happened in 1971 and pay close attention to that first chart on WTF Happened in 1971, productivity versus wages. And based on your comment, I would say the U.S. needs higher wages way more than we need cheap labor. And I think that talking point that we need cheap labor for the jobs Americans won't take, I think that is a mainstream media, mainstream financial press talking point that has been sold to us, and it is bunk. What happens if we don't get that influx of cheap labor? Well, then the price of those jobs that Americans won't take will have to rise until Americans will take them. And then maybe we won't have such a gap between the productivity of the average American worker and the wages of the average American worker, which has exploded since 1971 when we went off the gold standard and continues to grow to this day. I think we need higher wages more than we need cheap labor.
I think that's fair. I appreciate that, Jack. And we're going to end there, guys, because now that is a wrap.